Hi, I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends. Welcome back to Ohio Politics Explained. Summer is nearing a sleepy end, but there's still plenty to catch up on. Today, we'll discuss Senator Bernie Moreno's first months in D.C., a Trump directive on sex ed, and what's on the horizon when lawmakers return to Columbus. Joining me today is Jesse Balmert.
Always happy to be here.
Let's start with Moreno. We published a story this week looking back at his first months in office, and it's been pretty interesting. Despite being a freshman, he landed a Senate leadership gig and quickly became a key ally for the White House. And I feel like that loyalty to President Donald Trump is really driving how he navigates politics and policy. Do you think Ohioans are getting what they expected, whether they like it or not?
Yeah, I think so. Senator Moreno was able to defeat Democrat Sherrod Brown pretty handily. Obviously, it was in a year where President Donald Trump was also on the ballot, and so that was helpful for a candidate who was endorsed by Trump. But really, the senator from the beginning has said that he is pro-Trump policies, and he's really been leaning into that in his new role and position.
Yeah, we've seen him lean in really hard on immigration. As one example, he supports the White House's crackdown on undocumented immigrants. He was born in Colombia. His family immigrated from Colombia when he was a kid. And he always says that as a legal immigrant, it's offensive to him when people enter the country through other means. We've also seen him talk a lot about the so-called Big Beautiful Bill that passed earlier this year. He supported that, has been a big advocate for it, and that kind of got him in some hot water the other week in Cleveland.
Yeah, I think Moreno and the crowd just really didn't see eye to eye on a variety of issues at the city club, including immigration and Ukraine and this Big Beautiful Bill. Cleveland tends to be a more democratic city, so it's maybe not surprising those were the protesters or the people who showed up.
Yeah, it was a spicy lunch, and I think kind of emblematic of how he responds to criticism or detractors in some ways. He's kind of a fiery guy, not dissimilar to Vice President J.D. Vance. And you saw that play out a little bit. So that was, interesting. And I think we'll continue to see him put himself at the center of big issues, whether it was the big fight in Cincinnati or the closure of the paper mill in Chillicothe last month. He always tends to find a way to make himself, part of these conversations or join the conversations that are happening.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the reasons why he's been so successful in DC so far as like rising the ranks. Being in a leadership position so early is certainly indicative of how he's seen in DC and in particular by the Trump administration.
Our next topic is sex education. The Trump administration threatened to cut funding for Ohio youth prisons unless they remove references to transgender people in their sex ed materials. The Ohio Department of Youth Services got $1.8 million from what's known as the Personal Responsibility Education Program, which teaches young people about abstinence, contraception, why STIs are bad, all that. What specifically does DYS need to change, and do we expect them to comply?
Yeah, so it's basically as part of this education requirement, they have some language relating to gender identity or the existence of transgender people. Also just talking about pronouns and, how you can ask someone about pronouns. And this is language and material that was approved by the previous Biden administration, but the Trump administration is taking issue with it now.
And it's interesting that it's specifically focused on the prison curriculum because Ohio doesn't have like a standardized sex ed curriculum in schools, right?
Yeah, so this was sent to the Department of Youth Services, which to your earlier question, I believe is going to adjust some of this language so that they can keep their funding. That was generally the vibe I got from their response. But this was not sent to the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce because Ohio doesn't have one set sex ed requirement. Ohio lawmakers and advocates have worked for a while to try to get this to be the case because it is one of, if not the only state without comprehensive sex education requirements, but it tends to descend into issues like this.
Let's wrap up today by looking ahead. Ohio lawmakers are scheduled to return from summer recess later this month, and they left some pretty big issues on the table. They're still debating rules for marijuana and hemp. They could also take up more of Governor Mike DeWine's vetoes on property taxes, and at some point, they'll get recommendations from DeWine's task force to look at. But the biggest elephant in the room at this point is probably redistricting. Remind us what's going on.
Yeah, so Ohio has to redraw its congressional map, which is the people who represent us in Washington, D.C. Currently, there are 15 members. 10 of those are Republicans and 5 are Democrats. And because Democrats and Republicans did not agree on the same map back in 21 and 22, we have to draw a new one for the next several elections.
So we're not just doing this for fun like some other states.
Yeah, fun is one word for it, but yes, other states are doing this. You saw Texas passed a map that would increase Republicans. California is considering a map that would increase Democratic seats there. So there really is this kind of arms race nationally in order to get more Republican or Democratic seats heading into what's expected to be a pretty competitive midterm election in 26 for control of the U.S. House of Representatives.
And Ohio kind of kickstarted its process this week. They put out a website where people can submit proposed maps to the lawmakers who are doing this if they so choose. I'm not sure how often people take them up on that. I don't know how many people are just sitting around thinking up potential congressional district maps, but that is sort of phase one. And then I guess we go from there, but it doesn't seem like this is going to happen quickly.
Yeah, there's kind of a 3-phase process with this. I would be surprised if Ohio approves a map in the first month, which is September. We're already here. That's when the Ohio lawmakers would have to approve it, and there has to be a pretty significant Democratic buy-in for that to happen. After that point, it goes to this 7-member Ohio Redistricting Commission, which includes 4 lawmakers and then 3 statewide officials. All 3 of those statewide officials are Republicans, so once again, the GOP has the advantage. And then if they can't come to a conclusion, it heads to November where this map could be approved without any Democratic support. I know there's going to be a push from Democrats to stick with the current map, if not find ways to improve it. But there's going to be significant pressure from national Republicans to pick up some more GOP seats.
Yeah, we're at a 10-5 split right now, and I've heard murmurs of maybe 13-2, depending on which seats they decide to focus on.
Yeah, we've talked about this, but I think Marcy Kaptur's seat in the Toledo area is the most likely target, followed by Representative Nelia Sykes' seat in the Akron area. And then if you get kind of ambitious, Representative Greg Landsman in the Cincinnati area it's more of a stretch because you have to keep the entire city of Cincinnati, which tends to be more Democratic in one congressional district.
It's going to be fun or something.
Fun is a word for it.
And one more thing before you go. Space Force is not coming to the home of the Wright brothers. Trump announced this week that headquarters will instead go to Alabama, despite efforts by Vice President J.D. Vance and other Ohio officials to bring it here. But Ohio is still hoping to land NASA HQ.